Today I will be using the Woodless Watercolor Pencils and creating 3 cards for you guys. Stay tuned. Hello everyone, welcome to Creative Coloring with Erum. Today's video is all about these amazing new Woodless Watercolor Pencils by Altenew. The projects that you see feature different stems, and I will use the pencils in different ways to see how they work. Before I begin, I will tell you this that I have not tried or tested these pencils before except for making that swatch. In fact, I have never used watercolor pencils. Maybe as a kid I might have used them, but I don't remember. So this is new territory for me, guys. For my first card, I am stamping one flower from the Simple Roses stamp set in Vanilla Cream Dye ink. I am going to test these pencils with the no-line watercolor look. The no-line watercolor look is considered a hard look to achieve and master, so I thought let's just begin with that and then experiment with other things. So what I'm doing right now is I am applying the pigment directly onto the 8-2 watercolor cardstock with a very light hand. I'm only being careful because I don't know how the pigment will react to the water, but you will see I will grow confident as I move along. Also people, this is not a coloring tutorial, so I won't be showing the entire process, but still majorly showing you how well you can build up layers if you heat set in between. I'm only using a water brush and pulling out the pigment. I'll also test out on slightly dry paper how the pencil will react, and also try to add a bit of shading by using a slightly darker color. Then again reactivating the pigment with water. Now I'll jump to the center of the flower, and here I am using Ruby Red and Coral Bliss. I get a little bit more confident here after coloring a couple of petals. I've applied more of Coral Bliss here. Now I'll take a fine point water brush to activate the Ruby Red pigment, and then take a second clean brush with water in it to pull out the Coral Bliss pigment and let the Ruby Red be where it is. Do you see the detail? I have not even added any layers to it yet. Now I'll color all the nooks the same way. The Ruby Red is going to be the color that will show depth on my rose. I also have a cup of water on my right where I keep taking my brush off to clean. Also notice how well you can pull off the pigment. If you think you applied too much of it, just swipe your clean brush over the area to pick up excess pigment, or use a tissue paper. I could easily pick up color from the pencil with a wet brush and it will react just like a pan would. But I want to test these pencils out differently so that you can see other ways of using them as well, instead of just the wet brush to tip method, which I will use in the future and sometimes during this video too, but the techniques won't be revolved around that method alone. For my stem, I'll use Sicilian amber to draw the stem and then use a very fine brush, a wet brush, to activate the pigment. Next, I will apply paperback pigment directly to add shadow to the stem. If you want to slow down the video, please go to settings and choose the speed that suits you. You will not be able to listen to what I have to say, but then you will be able to follow along. Next, I'll stamp the leaves, again in Vanilla Cream Dye ink, and use the color Moss to add the green to the end of the leaf where it's connecting to the stem. And you can see that I will apply quite a lot of pigment, and to the tip of the leaves I'm adding yellow ochre. In the middle, I added a bit of limeade. I'll use a water brush to cover the leaf with water and let the colors merge so the transition is not stark. If you want more control, I suggest you use brush to pencil tip method instead of using the pencil directly onto the cardstock. Now I wanted to show you that you can even add splatters with these pencils. You may already know this, but for me everything is new. Okay, so now I know I said I won't be explaining the whole process and I'll just review the pencils, but I was not happy with how my card was looking. This card is missing the mean look, the very messy watercolor background. So I picked up Oolong Tea watercolor pencil, and I just hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, and started adding pigment. Absolutely not sure how it will look, but still wanting to try it out. And I thought, not bad, not bad. Let's keep adding it everywhere. Fast forward. Let's ruin the card. But that didn't happen. I will add those splatters again because obviously the splatters will react with water and I will lose all that detail on the background. But I wasn't liking the flower flying in the air. It looked like it was flying midair. I really can't do reviews. I have to complete the projects. Maybe a tad more pigment directly from the pencil would work and satisfy my messy heart. You should have heard me say yes at this moment, but still I kept it quite light and not as dark as I usually make my backgrounds. While the background was still wet, I added splatters so that they diffuse and add more texture to the background. Once dry, I'll add more splatters so that they are more visible and pronounced. I'm using Moss watercolor pencil for this. Here I wanted to show you that we can even do black paint splatters with this. Yay! This made me so happy because those are quite pigmented enough for splatters, which is awesome. You will see in the next project how insanely pigmented these pencils are. To finish, I'll just stamp the sentiment, add more splatters of gold metallic watercolor, fine black paint splatters, and also a lot of white splatters, plus satin gold sequins. And my card is done. Okay, on to the second project, which features Paeonia Japonica. I hope again I'm pronouncing it correctly. I stamped this in Obsidian ink and heat embossed it in crystal clear embossing powder. After that no line coloring, I absolutely deserved some easy coloring within the walls of heat embossed image. I have my panel ready. This is the A2 watercolor cardstock. And what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to apply the orange pigment next to the flower center, and then the yellow pigment at the tips of the petals. It's just like I do with watercolor, and then I'll drop in water and look at this. Super pigmented. I applied too much, ladies and gentlemen, but look at that transition and that shading. It looks very nice, doesn't it? Let's try it again with lesser pigment this time, applying yellow to the tips and orange next to the flower center, and then dropping clean water, moving the water to help move the pigment slightly. So you see this work too. We do not need a lot of pigment. A little goes a long way. Though the vibrant petal looks good on camera, but in person I could have worn my shades had I not lightened it later on. Oh yeah, keep an eye on that. When I will remove some of the pigment off of it, it will come off very easily. I'll fast forward this and move on to the leaves. Then I'll color just 1 or 2 leaves. And just look at this. When I want to remove the extra pigment off, I will just add water to that petal and then swipe my brush or use a tissue paper, and the pigment will come off. It will lighten considerably. For the leaves, I'll add moss pigment in the midrib with a light hand, and then I will add yellow ochre on the tips. Use the water brush to activate the pigment and turn them into fall leaves. First, activate just the green and then pull in the yellow ochre. I will go back in on the leaves directly with the pencil to add a darker pigment. Remember that the leaves are still wet, and this will create a texture on the leaves. For the background, I'll start by adding Sicilian amber, and I'll make this kind of ombre, darker at the bottom and lighter as we move upwards. I'll also add a bit of oolong tea to this. I'll dab the brush as I don't want a uniform look but a textured look, and by dabbing the brush onto the wet paint it will create that look. I'll fast forward this. I'm just adding color wash as I move upward. I use the dry brush technique so that the strokes are visible, giving more texture to the background. I'll add more pigment to the top portion here as it looks quite different than the bottom. Once I'm done, I'll dry the panel, then add splatters. Next, I'll use clean water and add splatters of that onto the panel. As I think my leaves look too flat, make sure your panel is completely dry before doing this, because the reason I'm adding water is so that the water will react with the pigment of the watercolor pencils, and then I will sop them up with the tissue paper. And look at the variation on the leaves now. They look variegated. I'll now add black paint splatters, then a lot of white splatters. I then remembered I didn't add a sentiment, but after the panel dried, I stamped the same one as I did on the first card, because it was out. This turned out quite nice actually, and I was quite surprised by how the pigment was reacting and how it flowed so easily. So I had another idea just because of this. For my third card, I have heat embossed Satin flower stamp on A2 watercolor cardstock in pure white embossing powder. And if you have been following my work, you would know about my scribble spritz watercolor technique that I do with watercolor brush markers, and it works brilliantly. So I thought I would try the same technique with these pencils. I'm adding ruby red, turquoise, ruby light and lavender fields. I will just scribble the pigment onto the image, and be careful of the embossing or it will chip off. I have chosen colors that won't make a muddy color when mixed together. Now I will use the spray bottle and spritz over my panel. I will also use my paintbrush to move the pigment around. I think I added a little too much water, but this looks so cool. It looks like one of those powder pigments available. I have never used them, but it definitely gives the same kind of look. I'm going to dry the panel with my heat gun. Then on the leaves, I will use lavender fields and turquoise watercolor pencil pigment. Then repeat the same. Spritz with water. Move around the pigment with the brush, if there is any need. I'll then dry the panel again completely. I went ahead and die cut the image. I'll adhere this onto a blue cardstock with foam tape. Then I'll add splatters of white chalk paint. After this, I just adhered the sentiment and added sequins. I think this is quite an interesting look for the scribble spritz watercolor technique. I really didn't think this would work, but it did. These are very reactive to water and flow very easily. I didn't have to do a lot of moving around the pigment with my brush. So today we colored these 3 pieces. that is all from my side today. You can see for yourself, the pencils are really pigmented and the colors are gorgeous. I hope you enjoyed the video. When you share your projects using these pencils, tag Altenew at Altenew LLC and me at Glitter and Swirls. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching. Bye.
Hello there! Did that video just spark your creativity? And do you want more project ideas and inspiration videos too? Well, if you do, please make sure that you subscribe to the Altenew YouTube channel. Also, make sure that you do click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye!